Hello everyone. Tonight, I've got a batch of chilling tales to share with you. But before we dive in, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep creating even better content. Now, sit back, relax, and join me as we embark on this eerie journey together. I'd always been drawn to my grandmother's attic, its crates and trunks promising hidden treasures of bygone eras. When she passed, she left one trunk to me, an ornately carved cedar chest with brass hinges that gleamed in the dim light. The note attached read simply, "Do not open after dark." Of course, I couldn't resist. That evening, curiosity burned in my chest. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the living room. I carried the trunk to the center of the floor and knelt beside it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a single object, a porcelain doll dressed in a pale lavender gown, her dark hair arranged in ringlets and her blue glass eyes wide open. She sat upright, propped against the velvet lining. No other items, no letters, just her. A chill raced down my spine. I pulled the doll out and cradled her in my arms. Her gaze felt unnervingly direct, as if seeking something from me. I set her on the couch, then shut the trunk with a click. The brass latch snapped tight. I turned all to leave, but the attic light flickered and died. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight and trained it on the doll. In that beam, her head was now turned, gazing at me from the couch. My breath caught. I crept closer. The ringlets framed her porcelain face perfectly, but the slightest crease of her painted lips hinted at a smirk. I swallowed. "It's just a doll," I told myself. I scooped her up and placed her on a shelf in my bedroom. I switched off the attic, locked the door, and went to bed. At 2:29 a.m., I woke to a soft thumping like footsteps above me. The attic door was locked, but I heard the trunk lid creak open, then slam shut. My heart pounded as I lay frozen, listening to the trunk's echoes. Finally, silence. I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, the doll sat at the foot of my bed. I blinked, startled. I hadn't moved her. Her head tilted sideways as if studying me. Goosebumps rose on my arms. I carried her back to the shelf. Her eyes followed me still. That night, I left the house party early, tired, and collapsed into bed. I slept fitfully until a cold presence drew me awake. I opened my eyes to the doll perched on my chest. Porcelain fingers curled around my shirt. Her eyes glinted in the moonlight. I bolted upright. The doll toppled onto the floor with a clatter. I yanked the bedding off and leapt from the bed. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken longing. I grabbed my phone. The flashlight revealed the doll's tiny footprints, smudges of dollhouse paint leading toward my closet. I swallowed back a scream and followed the trail. The closet door creaked open. Inside, the doll stood on a shoebox, hands clasped like a child waiting for praise. I slid back the door, my foot catching on a box, knocking it to the floor. The doll giggled a brittle porcelain chime, then whispered, "Play with me." My blood turned to ice. "No," I stammered. "You stay in the attic." It cocked its head. "I want you." The voice was soft but insistent. I bolted from the closet, fleeing into the hallway. The lights flickered as I passed. When I turned back, the doll stood at the end of the hallway, eyes burning with yearning. I didn't stop running until I reached the attic door. My hands shook as I unlocked it. Inside the trunk, sat in the center as if inviting me in. I placed the doll carefully inside, snapped the lid shut, and locked it. As I climbed down the ladder, I heard a whisper from above. "Don't forget me again." I slammed the attic hatch and barricaded it with furniture. That night, I slept without interruption. But my dreams were filled with porcelain laughter and ringlets dancing in candlelight. Days later, burdened by dread, I sold the doll at an antique shop downtown. The shopkeeper eyed it warily, but paid in cash and wrapped it carefully. I watched as she carried it to the back room, locking a separate cabinet. I exhaled relief, but that night, as I lay in bed, I heard a single knock on my bedroom window, 3 soft taps. I bolted upright. Outside on the porch stood the doll's lavender gown, clean and empty dusty ringlets fluttering in the breeze. No doll, just the sound of its laughter fading into the night. I never thought I'd regret keeping a landline. After all, it was a backup if my cell died. But that phone almost cost me my sanity. I inherited the old rotary bystanders of my grandparents' house when they passed. And though I mostly ignored it, I liked its vintage charm. Until the night the calls began. It started 10 days after I moved in. I was working late in the living room, typing up a project, when the phone rang. The hall light glowed a tired yellow, and the hum of my laptop filled the silence. I glanced at the clock, 11:03 p.m. Irritated, I muttered, "If it's a telemarketer," and lifted the receiver. My voice was brisk. "Hello?" Dead silence. Just a faint, rhythmic breathing, as though someone stood right by the handset. Then the line cracked with static, and a child's voice whispered, "Shh, hello?" I frowned. "Who is this?" No answer, only that wheezing breath. My pulse kicked in. I leaned back. Wrong number. I snapped and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment, wondering if I dozed off at my desk. I shook my head, told myself I was imagining things, and returned to my work. That night, I dreamt I heard the phone again, before I woke up to the shrill ring at exactly 3:17 a.m. My room was dark. Moonlight pooled on the hardwood floor. My heart thundered as I sat up. My cell lay charging on the nightstand, but I sprang out of bed and padded to the living room. The phone hovered on its cradle cord coiled neatly. I picked up the receiver with shaking fingers. "Hello." This time, a clear, trembling voice. Please, help me." I froze. "Who is this?" "Where are you?" I demanded. The line crackled. The voice broke into soft sobs. "I'm in the house." My blood ran cold. I scanned the room. Everything looked normal. The couch, the coffee table, the TV off. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean, in the house?" Silence. Then the voice closer, soft and urgent. "Behind you." I spun around. No one. The lamp beside the couch cast my shadow long and thin across the wall. The air felt dense, charged with electricity. My skin prickled. I dropped the receiver, backing away, and stumbled into the hallway. I never wanted to hear that voice again. But the phone rang the next night, 3:17 again. My cell was in my pocket. Despite every instinct screaming at me, I answered the rotary. "Hello," I whispered. A click. Then the sound of small feet barefoot tapping on hardwood. The breathing. And that voice. "Can you see me?" I closed my eyes. "Who are you? What do you want?" A pause. Then a laugh, soft, childish, echoing around me, as if unleashed in a cathedral. "Play with me," My stomach twisted. I don't want to play. You have to. The voice sounded behind me, yet I was alone. Or I get bored. My hands shook as I pressed the receiver back onto the cradle. The dial spun itself once, twice, then clattered still. I fled to my bedroom and locked the door, pressing my back against it, listening as the silent house settled. No ringing, no footsteps, just my own breath. I spent the remainder of the night huddled on the floor, clutching my cell, too scared to sleep. By morning, I was exhausted, yet determined. I'd fix this. I Googled haunted rotary phone and found a single forum post describing a tragic accident. A little girl, Emily, who died in that very house decades ago after running away from an abusive father. Her cries unheard by the adults who slept until her brother used the phone to try to call for help. In the chaos, Emily fell and hit her head, bleeding to death before anyone noticed. They never recovered her body, and stories say her spirit still wanders lonely and desperate. I shivered. The calls always came at 3:17, the exact time of her death, according to the coroner's report I found. I gulped cold coffee and decided to end this once and for all. That night, I taped the phone's cradle down and tossed the receiver in the trash. I unplugged the line at the wall and crammed the jack into a drawer. When 3:17 struck, I lay awake in the dark, willing silence to hold. The second hand ticked forward. Nothing. I exhaled triumphant. Then the muffled ring of the fridge. My stomach dropped. I crept out in the dark dread pooling in my gut. I opened the fridge. Empty. Light off. The room was silent, but I felt watched. I fled back to my bedroom. As I reached the door, the landline rang from the drawer where I'd stashed the receiver. Its shrill tone sliced through the darkness. I froze. I dared not pick it up. A whisper seeped from beneath the door. I found you. I screamed and threw myself against the door. It held. The ringing stopped. I listened, nothing but my own sobs. Dawn broke slowly gray and cold. I packed a bag and left that morning. I donated the house's furniture, including the phone, and moved into a tiny apartment downtown. I replaced my cell battery and tossed out all corded phones. Still, I sometimes lie awake at 3:17, sweating, convinced I hear a faint ring in the wires beneath the floor. And at night, in the corners of my new home, I swear I glimpse a small girl's silhouette, standing too still watching. I've never answered a call since, but sometimes I wake heart-pounding to a whisper on the breeze play with me. I'd always taken comfort in the thought that nobody could hear me when I was alone in the house, until the day I discovered otherwise. My parents gifted me the house for my 18th birthday, a cozy bungalow with a network of old cast-iron vents that snaked through the walls. Heating pipes, they said. Modern convenience, I thought. It began the evening I decided to reorganize my closet. Incense burned atop the dresser, filling the air with sandalwood. I hummed along to my playlist as I sorted through boxes. Beneath a stack of sweaters, I found a crumpled letter. My heart skipped. I'd never seen the handwriting before. No envelope, just a single sheet yellowed with age. The words were simple. I'm trapped. Please help me. E. I paused, eyes scanning the vents above. I laughed nervously. E, whoever they were, must have slipped a prank note into the walls. I balled it up and tossed it into the trash, determined to forget it. That night, I left the closet door ajar and went to bed. Around midnight, I woke to a soft, metallic click. I sat up groggy, scanning the room. The closet door swung shut. I frowned. swung my legs to the floor, and walked over. I pushed the door open. No wind, no one there. I shrugged it off and climbed back into bed. Just as I drifted off, I heard a whisper, low and urgent, coming from the direction of the closet. "Help me!" My breath caught. I bolted upright. Was it the wind? The old vents rattled in the walls at random. Nothing to be afraid of. Yet the whisper repeated clearer this time through the vent above the closet. "Help me, please." My pulse hammered against my ribs. I grabbed my phone and shone the flashlight into the vent great darkness. I pressed my ear to the metal, listening. A faint rasp of breath too close to be coincidence. "'Tis to it." I backed away, heart pounding. I snapped the closet door open and switched on the lamp. The vent trembled as though something rapped against it from the inside. I bolted from the room, blinking in the hallway light. For days, I avoided the vents. I kept the closet stuffed shut. I replaced the grate with a tape. But every night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., I heard the same desperate whisper. "Help me." I recorded it on my phone. Playback was just muffled static and my own ragged breathing. I tried calling my parents, no answer. My friends accused me of doctoring the audio. I began to doubt myself. One afternoon, determined to end it, I climbed into the attic to access the main duct. The attic hatch in my closet creaked open into a narrow crawl space lined with dusty pipes and vents. With a screwdriver, I removed a section of grate. The vent opening yawned before me, darkness descending into the bowels of the house. I trained my flashlight inside and held my breath. The beam revealed nothing but a series of tunnels branching off into the walls. Then, from deep within, I heard the whisper, "Please." I swallowed and shone the light down one passage. The beam caught on something that glinted in the gloom, a small tarnished key. It lay on the metal floor of the vent, a single rusted loop. I grabbed it. My fingers brushed its cold surface. A distant echo of laughter, childish, reverberated through the ducts. I yanked my hand back, heart stumbling. On the key was engraved a single letter E. My mind raced. Emily, Eleanor, Edgar. I thought of the letter in my closet. I smoothed the key in my palm and made my way back down the walls, pressing in as if the house had exhaled around me. In my bedroom, I shone the flashlight on the key. My closet looked as ominous as ever, the door sealed with tape. Gathering courage, I peeled back the tape and pushed the door open. The closet was dark clothes spilling onto the floor. I knelt and felt along the back wall, the floorboards cold under my palms. To my shock, there was a small lock hidden beneath a loose plank perfectly matched to the key. My breath hitched. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. A soft click and a panel in the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow alcove. Inside lay a tarnished locket and a stack of yellowed photographs, sepia-toned images of a young girl with dark hair, smiling shyly at the camera. I lifted the locket. It snapped open. Inside was a tiny portrait of the girl and an inscription, "To my dear Eleanor forever." My heart thundered. Eleanor? The girl in the photos was her. Emily, no, Eleanor. A distant sound made me whirl around. The closet door creaked shut on its own. My lamp flickered. I hugged the locket, trembling. A breath behind me, quiet but deliberate. I turned. The alcove was empty. but the air thrummed with sorrow. From the vent above a final whisper, "Thank you." The grate rattled once, twice, then stilled. The house fell into a blessed silence. I sank to the floor, clutching the locket and photographs. Tears blurred my vision. I realized I'd freed her spirit, closing the loop that had bound her to the vents for nearly a century. I carried the belongings to the living room and placed them on the mantelpiece. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without hearing the vents call. Years later, I still live in that house. I reopened the closet, removed the loose plank, and stowed the locket and photos in a glass case. The vents are silent now, the pipes warm with quiet air. But sometimes, when I kneel in the closet to retrieve a coat, I pause where the hidden lock once was and feel a faint brush of cold air like a gentle caress, and hear the faintest whisper, almost like a sigh, "Good night." I just turned 15 when my parents left me alone for the weekend. They were visiting my uncle's new cabin up north, and I begged to stay. Behind my grades were good, and I didn't want to trek through rain-soaked woods. They relented, warning me not to wander outside after dark. Friday night, I curled up on the couch with my laptop streaming late-night horror videos. Thunder rolled outside, rattling the window panes. Around midnight, the power blinked and the room went dark except for the pale glow from the street lamp outside filtering through the curtains. That's when I saw it. A shadow, perfectly human-shaped, framed in the window glass. I froze, heart pounding. The silhouette was still. I told myself it was a trick of the light, perhaps a neighbor walking by. I rose and peered out, but the street was empty, rain sluicing off the asphalt into rivulets. Back inside, I locked all the windows. I checked the front door twice. Every latch clicked into place. Safe, I told myself. I went to fetch a blanket from my bedroom, and that's when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps on the living room window. It sounded too deliberate to be hail or branches. I crouched behind the couch, breath catching in my throat as I listened. Then the knock again. Tap, 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 like knuckles. I crept forward, each step a battle against the dread tightening my chest. I switched on the lamp beside the couch. The silhouette was gone, just fogged glass and droplets of rain. I exhaled, voice trembling, and reached for my phone to call my mom. No signal. Of course. I sighed and pocketed it. I stayed up the rest of the night, lights blazing, unable to shake the feeling that someone watched me. When dawn arrived, I fell asleep on the couch and slept until afternoon. When I woke, the living room was still brightly lit, sunlight streaming in. I rubbed my eyes and froze. Written on the inside of the window in dripping watermarks, "Come play." My stomach lurched. That message hadn't been there when I fell asleep. I touched the glass. It was cold and wet, but I'd sealed the window tight. I snapped a photo with my phone hands shaking, then tore the curtains closed and taped them down with packing tape. The rest of the day passed in jittery silence. I didn't dare go outside. I ate cold cereal and watched TV with the volume cranked. At dinner time, I boiled water for soup and forced myself to eat, glancing at the curtained window every few minutes. When night fell again, I piled blankets on the couch and tucked in as many pillows as I could. I switched on every light in the house and put on headphones playing static white noise, anything to drown out the silence. At 11:17 p.m., I jolted awake to footsteps on the porch. Heavy, measured steps pacing back and forth. The floorboards groaned under the weight. I pressed my face into the couch cushions, listening as the steps paused beneath the window. Then, And I'll never forget this, the hush of breath against the glass. A wet rasp like lungs filling with water. My blood froze. I peeked through a gap in the blankets. A smudged face stared back at me, pale skin pulled tight over sharp cheekbones, eyes dull and red-rimmed. Mud spattered its cheek, and its lips split in a slow grin. A single finger traced the words, "Come play," as if tasting them again. I screamed and bolted from the couch, shoving pillows and blankets wherever I could. I ran upstairs to my bedroom and locked the door, collapsing against it. My heart hammered like a jackhammer. Then, scratching on the other side of the door. Slow, deliberate, like claws dragging across wood. I scraped my back against the floor, hugging my knees, tears streaming down my face. "Go away," I sobbed. "Get out." Silence. After what felt like hours, the scratching stopped. But then a new sound. A whisper, so soft, I could barely make it out. "I want to play." My blood ran cold. I forced myself to stand fumbling for my bedside lamp. I switched it on, and light flooded the room. No one was there. I grabbed my backpack, threw in my phone and charger, and opened the window, the second-floor window that looked out onto the side yard. Below, a tangle of shrubs formed a loose barrier, but I didn't care. I climbed onto the windowsill and dropped down into the wet grass, landing hard on my feet. I sprinted around the house to the front yard and dashed to the street. Rain battered me as I ran barefoot to my neighbor's house, Mrs. Ramirez hammering on her door until she answered. I was soaked, shaking, babbling that something was in my house, something not human. She ushered me inside, wrapping me in a towel. Together, we called my parents and the police. When they arrived, I led them to my house. The front door was locked. We pried it open. Inside the living room was empty curtains. Torn down tape ripped from the window. On the coffee table lay my phone screen smashed. The words, "Come play," were smeared onto a coaster in red, the imprint of a finger dipped in what looked disturbingly like blood. No footprints led away, no sign of the figure that had haunted me. The police found no evidence of forced entry. My parents arrived frantic, and we stayed at Mrs. Ramirez's until dawn. In the light of day, the house seemed innocent, dry floors, locked windows, no strange messages. But the coaster remained stained, and every time the rain pattered on the roof, I felt that wet rasp at my ear. They moved me out a week later. I haven't been back since. But sometimes, when I wash dishes at my grandma's old farmhouse, I see a single drip of water, tracing a message on the window, still waiting. I never paid much attention to mirrors until the night I nearly lost myself to one. I'd inherited an ornate cheval glass from my great-aunt Lucille, a tall, freestanding mirror with a dark wooden frame carved in twisting vines. To me, it was an elegant antique until it whispered my name. It started innocently. One evening, I returned home late from work and draped my coat over the armchair. I sat in the bedroom, flicking through my phone, when a flash of movement behind me caught my eye. I glanced up at the mirror. The reflection was empty. My pulse steadied nothing more than a trick of the light. I shrugged it off and headed to the kitchen for water. Later, as I brushed my teeth, I noticed something odd. The mirror's surface rippled like rain on a pond. I spat, eyes locked on my reflection. The ripples smoothed. I splashed my face with cold water and leaned in. Above my head, I saw briefly a shape standing behind me, long hair dark, obscuring its face. My breath caught. I turned fast, nothing. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection's shoulders slumped, head cocked to the side as though it were watching me. I stumbled away, heart thundering. I flicked on the bathroom light. The mirror gleamed innocently back at me. I laughed weakly. "Just tired," I muttered. I finished brushing and sprinted to bed. That night, I awoke at 2:46 a.m. My room was pitch black. The only light came from the mirror's faint silver sheen. I realized with horror that the full-length glass stood inches from my bed, angled so I could see my sleeping form. My skin pricked with cold dread. I tried to will my heavy eyelids back shut, but I couldn't sleep. So I stared. Minutes passed. Then the mirror darkened like a cloud enveloping a moon. My reflection vanished. Panic seized me. I sat up and flicked on the bedside lamp. The mirror's surface was pitch black, as if it had swallowed every scrap of light. I heard a soft click behind me, like the hinge of a door. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing but the empty room. I tried the lamp switch again. Nothing. The light died. Total darkness. The ticking of the clock on my nightstand smothered against the silence. A slow, scraping noise began, very soft, coming from the mirror itself. Then a whisper. "Open the door." My breath hitched. The mirror shimmered. I watched in horror as cracks formed in the blackness, webbing outward. Through the fractures I glimpsed the room, but darker, older, as though seen decades ago. In that reflection, I saw the antique dresser I'd replaced years before wallpaper peeling, and a tall woman in a white nightgown standing at the foot of my bed. She raised a finger to her lips. "Shh." I scrambled off the bed, reaching for my phone on the floor. No flashlight, dead battery. I bolted to the door, fumbling the knob. It stuck. I yanked. It budged. I burst into the hallway. My heart thundered, echoing through the dark corridor. I paused, listening. Silence. I inched back toward the bedroom. The lamp flickered back to life as I entered. The mirror gleamed normally. My reflection stared back, pale, wide-eyed, drenched in sweat. I rushed to the mirror, the doctor in me refusing to concede panic. I placed my palm on the glass. It was cold, icy. I pressed harder. I felt something behind it, a pulsing like a faint heartbeat. My skin prickled. "Stop," I whispered. But the glass warmed under my hand, pulsing in time with that hidden heartbeat. A soft knock sounded from inside the mirror. 3 slow raps. I jumped back, stumbling against the dresser. The lamp swung, casting warped shadows. Something moved behind the reflection. A hand pressed flat against the glass. Pale fingers splayed nails, black and jagged. I felt bile rise. I clenched my fists and aimed my gaze at my face in the mirror. My reflection blinked twice, though I had not. I exhaled, shaking. This isn't real. The reflection's lips curled into a grin, too wide, too cruel. It dipped its head, then rose, its eyes locking on mine. The surface of the glass rippled, beckoning. I tore my gaze away and bolted from the room. My bedroom door slammed behind me. I leaned against it, gasping for air. Behind the wood, the mirror must be pulsing, breathing, planning. I forced my legs to move and ran downstairs. In the living room, I flipped every light switch. Lamps blinked alive, shadows retreated. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and returned upstairs. I paused at the bedroom threshold, hand trembling on the doorknob. The other side of the door was as silent as a tomb. I closed my eyes, counted to 3, then wrenched it open. The lamp burned bright. The mirror stood untouched, but the floor beneath it was littered with splintered glass shards strewn across the carpet. My pulse hummed in my ears. How had that happened? Cautiously, I approached. The frame was intact, only the glass was broken. I pressed my ear to the mirror. I heard voices low and distant, like a crowd whispering from a great distance. They spoke my name in hollow echoes. My skin crawled. I backed away and raised the knife. With a cry of desperation, I swung at the glass. It shattered inward with a deafening crash, spraying the room with glittering fragments. I reeled back, knife clattering to the floor. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then a colossal groan as the mirror imploded, glass splintering into the darkness beyond. Light buckled, and the frame toppled, crashing across the room. A dreadful emptiness swallowed the space where the mirror had stood. The air was still stifling. I sank to the floor, knees trembling, tears stinging my eyes. I fled the room without looking back, slammed the door, and wedged a chair beneath the knob. I collapsed on the bed, hugging my knees, chest heaving. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, there was only the hollow ache of defeat. I had destroyed the mirror, but the whispers lingered in my mind. Open the door. That night, I slept fitfully. When dawn broke, I ventured into the bedroom. The door was still barricaded. I pried the chair away with trembling hands. The room was empty. No mirror, no frame, just ghostly dust on the floor. I swept it into a pile, determined to bury the pieces. But as I gathered the shards, one fragment caught the sunlight. In its bevel, I saw my face reflected perfectly, except for the eyes. They were black holes, empty and sorrowful. I dropped the shards, stumbling back. The pile scattered. The air felt heavy, as though the room remembered. I realized then I hadn't destroyed the mirror's power, I had unleashed it. And in that fragment, something of me remained trapped behind glass forever. I fled the house, soon after leaving the shards and the cursed frame for the new owner to discover. But sometimes, in my dreams, I stand before a mirror that isn't there and hear a soft knock inviting me to open the door. I never paid much attention to the attic. It was a cramped space under the eaves with a single dusty bulb and a stack of old trunks, family heirlooms long forgotten. When I first moved into the Victorian house, my grandmother warned me never to go up there after dark. "Old houses keep secrets," she whispered. Naturally, I laughed it off. Ghost stories were for children. It began one rainy evening, about a week after my grandmother's warning. I was studying in the living room when I heard the soft thunk of footsteps above me. I glanced at the ceiling. The attic hatch lay shut, the little brass latch glinting in the lamplight. Dismissing it as the house settling, I returned to my textbook. Minutes later, the footsteps came again, slow, deliberate pacing back and forth. I raised my head. Silence. I frowned. My grandmother's words flickered through my mind. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was tired. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Rain tapped against the window pane in a frantic rhythm. I reached for my phone and scrolled social media until my eyes burned. Then, at exactly 2:02 a.m., the footsteps started again, this time on the stairs leading to my bedroom. My heart lurched. The staircase beyond the hallway light was pitch black, but every creak, was as clear as if someone stood beside me. I gripped the covers, staring into the darkness. The sound stopped. I exhaled, chiding myself for being a coward. I slipped off the bed and padded barefoot to the door, flicking on the hallway light. Nothing. I returned to bed and waited. Sleep came only in fits, haunted by the echo of phantom steps. The next morning, I found muddy footprints in the dusty carpet of the attic stairs, tiny child-sized prints, as though a little girl had run up and down repeatedly. But the last time I checked, I'd sealed the hatch tight, and I was alone. I snapped a photo and sent it to my best friend Mark. He replied with a string of laughing emojis, and dude put a sign up that says no trespassing. That night, emboldened by Mark's teasing, I decided I'd prove there was nothing to fear. I fetched a flashlight and crept to the attic hatch. My hand hovered over the latch. My heart thundered in my chest. I flipped it open. The stairs yawned upward into darkness. "Stay out," I whispered, voice barely audible. 1 step, 2 steps of 3. The wooden steps moaned under my weight. I swept the beam around trunks, and in the far corner, a small antique rocking horse. Its paint was chipped mane, matted with dust. I aimed the light at it and felt a cold finger brush the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. My breath came in ragged gasps. I pointed the flashlight back to the rocking horse and froze. It was rocking slowly by itself. "Stop it!" I hissed, voice cracking. The rocking slowed, then stopped. I exhaled a shaky laugh. "Just a breeze," I muttered. But the window in the gable was tightly latched. I stepped forward. The wood beneath my socks felt slick, not dusty. I crouched down, shining the light on the floor. There are fishtail-shaped scuff marks, as if someone had scraped their shoes across the boards in agitation. A sudden scraping sound made me stumble back. Something slid across the attic floor. Toward me, a small porcelain doll, dressed in a faded pink gown. Its face was flawless, except for one blackened eye. I stared. The doll's lips curled into a smile. I backed up, heart thrumming. "Not funny," I whimpered, thinking of Mark's prank. But nobody else was in the house. I lifted the doll and hurled it toward the hatch. It landed with a crash downstairs. I scrambled after it, nearly tumbling down the stairs. In the living room, the doll lay at the base of the banister, staring up at me. I scooped it up, intending to throw it outside, but found its glaze ice cold in my palm. On its back, etched in tiny letters, "Don't forget me." I dropped it, sprinted to my desk, and grabbed my grandmother's old journal. She'd kept it locked away. I had no idea what was inside. I flipped through the brittle pages until I found a faded entry dated 1923. "My sweet Clara has wandered again. She loves the attic. She will not come down. Clara." The name flickered in my mind. I remembered my grandmother's stories of her great-aunt Clara, who vanished at age 7, last seen playing with her doll in the attic. My blood turned to ice. I flipped more pages. Another entry. I hear her footsteps every night pacing. She calls me upstairs. But once I climb, I cannot find her in the darkness. A final page. If Clara is still here, do not linger. She grows angry at company. A sudden crash echoed from the attic hatch above. The latch rattled. I pressed my back against the wall, trembling. "Grandma," I whispered. "Aunt Clara." The hatch snapped open. A pale hand gripped the edge knuckles white. Thin fingers curled over the wood. Below the doll, lay on the floor, its head tightening toward mine as if watching. I fled the room, the journal clutched to my chest. In the foyer, I hesitated, realizing I couldn't leave the house. Not yet. I had to help her. I ran back to the living room, retrieved the doll, and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The attic hatch hung open, inviting. I stepped inside. The rocking horse was still. The trunks stared like silent sentinels. In the flicker of my flashlight, I saw 2 small footprints in the dust leading to the far wall. Followed them to an old portrait of a little girl, Clara, I knew, now painted in oil, framed in tarnished brass. She wore the same pink gown as the doll, her one eye blackened in the portrait. Behind the painting, I noticed a seam in the plaster. Kneeling, I pressed my hand against it. A section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow alcove and a single wooden chair. Perched on the chair sat Clara's doll box, empty. The lid was carved with the same letters, "Don't forget me." A soft shuffle sounded behind me. I spun. The rocking horse swayed gently. My flashlight revealed no one. Yet I felt a presence. "Clara?" I whispered, voice barely steady. "I haven't forgotten you." The beam illuminated a slender figure. Stepping out of the shadow, Clara herself, pale and translucent, braided hair dripping with dust. Her good eye glowed faintly. She reached out, then paused. "Will you play?" she asked, voice echoing like wind in a tunnel. I swallowed. I'm sorry you're alone." Her face tilted. For a moment, she looked small, lost. She nodded once, then faded backward into the wall. The plaster seam closed with a soft sigh. Silence settled. I exhaled, tears streaming down my cheeks. I replaced the doll in the box, lifted the box onto the chair, and closed the alcove. I swept the dust off the rocking horse, straightened the painting, and snapped off the light. As I descended the stairs, I felt lightness, as though I'd freed someone trapped for a century. Back in the living room, I tucked Clara's journal in my bag. I planned to place the doll box and the journal next to the portrait where it belongs. Tomorrow, when the sun is high, I'll finish setting things right. But tonight in the dark, I heard no footsteps, only the quiet promise that for once the attic's secrets are at peace. I always thought the old house creaks were just that wood, settling pipes shifting, nothing more. I'd moved in alone after my divorce, craving solitude. The realtor warned me it was charming with character, never mention of the whispers. The first night, I unpacked boxes under a single lamp's amber glow. Midnight came and went. I stretched on the couch, sipping tea, when I heard it, a faint psst from the hallway. I froze, listening. Nothing. I shook my head. Probably the tea kettle boiling over in the kitchen. I went to check. The kettle sat cold and empty. I returned to the living room. As I sank into the sofa, a voice hissed directly behind me. "Help me!" It was breathy distant, yet I felt it right next to my ear. My spine snapped rigid. I whipped around empty room shadows dancing across peeling wallpaper. "Hello?" I called. Voice trembling. No answer. Laugh it off, I told myself. Ghosts only exist in movies. I forced my heartbeat down, chalking it up to stress. I went to bed, slippered, feet padding across floorboards that groaned in protest at 3:07 a.m. I woke to scratching like fingernails against plaster. My door frame rattled softly. I sat up, breath shallow. The scratching grew louder, moving along the wall. I flicked on the bedside lamp. The bedside clock glared 3:09 a.m. Too late for mice. I peeled back the covers and walked to the door. The hallway light was off, but moonlight slanted in from the front windows. I stepped into the corridor. The scratching stopped. Crisp silence. My jaw clenched as I stared down the hall. At the living room door, ajar, a sliver of shadow beyond it. I raised my phone to use the flashlight. The beam flickered across the wallpaper, faded floral vines curling upward. I noticed dark smudges between the patterns, like broad brushstrokes. Then the flashlight flicked out. Total darkness. Panic pounded in my chest. I fumbled with the phone until the light came back. But the smudges, they'd shifted. They formed letters, "Come here." My blood ran cold. My rational mind raced. Could someone have broken in, vandalizing the walls? But the front door was locked, and the back window latched. I would have heard someone. I backed away, stepping over a torn rug. As I reached the living room threshold, the chandelier above me swayed though there was no breeze. I spun, staring at empty space. A soft giggle echoed from the sitting room. A child's voice, playful. "Over here," it teased. I swallowed hard. A chill crept up my spine. "Who's there?" I croaked. No response, just that tittering echo, fading down the hall into the kitchen. I followed each step, reverberating through creaky boards. The kitchen light was off, but I could see the countertops littered with my unpacked dishes. A single red apple sat alone on the stove. Odd, I thought. I hadn't bought apples. My fridge hum stopped abruptly, plunging me into an oppressive quiet. Then the apple rolled off the stove, clattering on the floor. I jumped back. The lid of the trash can lifted and dropped. I exhaled shakily. My imagination, I told myself. I bent to pick up the apple in its perfect, unwounded skin. A chill made the hair on my arms stand up. Written in small pricked letters on the apple's surface, "Don't trust the walls." I dropped the fruit, stumbling away. Before I could react, a hand pale skinny reached from the wall and grabbed my ankle. I lurched, nearly hitting my face on the counter. The flesh of the hand was impossibly cold, clammy. I jerked free, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The hand retreated into the plaster with a soft pop, like cloth tearing. The wall rippled for a moment, as if it were alive. I ran back to the hallway. The lights flickered along the corridor, then went out. Total darkness swallowed me. I fumbled for my phone. The flashlight beam was the only thing keeping me from smashing into furniture. Ahead, at the end of the hall, my bedroom door, was a shape, a small girl in a white nightdress, head tilted, long dark hair shielding her face. Her feet hovered above the floor. My breath caught. She put a finger to her lips. "Shh." Her voice was velvet dark, promising cruelty. I turned to run back toward the living room, toward the front door, but the hallway stretched impossibly longer. The ceiling rose overhead, narrowing like a tunnel. My foot caught on the rug. I fell forward. The flashlight flew from my hand, spinning across the floor, extinguishing. Darkness closed in. I heard whispers everywhere. Soft pleas, angry hissings, laughter, all coming from the walls. They moaned, groaned, and implored. "Stay, play with us, join us." I crawled forward, pressing my back against the wall as I dragged myself toward the nearest door. My fingers found the knob. I twisted, bursting into my bedroom. I slammed the door and locked it. Inside my bed sat neatly made clothes piled on the chair, everything untouched as if frozen in time. But the closet door was ajar. A soft scratching sound came from within. I inched closer, heart thundering. The closet was empty except for some hanging clothes. The scratching stopped, replaced by a sigh that sounded too human. "I've been so lonely," it whispered. I swayed, terror pinning me to the spot. Through the closet's dim interior, I saw nothing. Yet the air felt suffocating heavy with longing. Then, the chandelier above me flickered and crashed to the floor, plunging me into more darkness. Glass shards tinkled like laughter as the candles around the room guttered, flooding the corners with pale light. On my dresser lay a small wooden toy chest I'd unpacked earlier. Its lid was open, revealing dozens of hand-carved dolls, each one twisted into unnatural angles, faces smiling in frozen, grotesque grins. The largest doll, a little girl with braided hair, turned her head toward me. I ran for the window, yanking it open. Fresh night air rushed in. Beneath a steep drop to the lawn, I hesitated too high. I spun around. The dolls had climbed out of the chest, lining up in rows across the carpet. Their wooden eyes glinted in candlelight. A chorus of wooden voices chanted, "Join us. Join us." I backed against the sill, panic clouding my mind. They advanced, joined by the pale girl from the hallway. The chanting climbed into a dreadful crescendo. Then, the crumbling walls groaned, splitting along the seams. From the cracks poured screaming faces, reaching limbs of plaster and dust. The dolls trembled, and the ghostly girl tilted her head. Something deep inside me snapped. I forced my trembling legs to move and hurled myself out the window. I smashed onto the overgrown hedges below, pain lancing every bone but adrenaline driving me forward. I tumbled into the darkness and ran barefoot across the lawn, not daring to look back. Behind me, the windows of that house glowed with candlelight, and I heard a distant echo of laughter, sweet, beckoning, full of promise. I never went back. The realtor tried to contact me, asking for the keys. I refused. I moved in with friends, changed my number. Yet sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the whispers behind the walls, calling my name, begging me to return and join them in their endless silent play. Hello everyone, I'm ZiBo, and thank you so much for watching until the very end of this video. I truly hope today's stories brought you some enjoyable moments. If you found them helpful, don't forget to leave a comment down below. Every bit of your feedback helps me improve and continue creating quality content. See you in the next video.